Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a lot to do as usual, but we're going to try some exciting new stuff. Speaking of new stuff, look at Rowan. Rowan's talking on the new phone system called the Party Line phone. We have another party line over in Tacarini, and if two dupes get on it, they get a bigger bonus. In fact, it's a +4 bonus if at least one of them are across space. Aren't they always across space? So I can understand +1 because no one else is talking, and I guess +2 would be as if the other phone would be sitting over here. So on the same planetoid. And at first I was like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But then I realized this is a party line phone. You can put these all over the place. You could have 5 on this planet and only 1 on this planet. And as long as this person is on the phone talking, anyone who picks up a phone over here is going to get a +4 to morale. Very cool. The only disadvantage is they take 120 watts and they emit 500 DTUs of heat. The main topic of today's episode is, well, making sure dupes don't suffocate. I started building our little spaceport and invariably everybody started suffocating, wah, wah, wah. Hashtag dupe problems. So I figured it's high in time that we actually put some Atmos suits in. And also in the comments, Joel suggested, hey, why don't we use some fertilizer? Wouldn't it also increase the growing speed of our grapefruit plants? And he's right, it would. Because anytime you fertilize a plant, it'll give it a farmer's touch and then a certain growth bonus. But the problem with it is it requires this farm station. And what it does is it produces micronutrient fertilizer and then they pour it all over the plants, and they grow faster. The bad thing is it takes 5 kilos of fertilizer. The second bad thing is it requires everything being in a greenhouse. Over on our room overlay, you can see that a greenhouse requires 96 tiles at max, which means we'll have to redo this if we want to use some of that. Normally, we don't really mess around with fertilizer, because to make fertilizer, you need phosphorite and polluted water. Well, it was around this time that all the dupes started making a mess all over the colony, and it's because all of these tanks had started filling up. And that's when I thought to myself, Joel might have had a great idea. So now, instead of us relying on the liquid reservoir tanks to take all the polluted water, well, we can use a fertilized synthesizer. Now, it's not going to last forever. It requires dirt. It also requires polluted water, which we have plenty of, and phosphorite, which we're making plenty of thanks to our Drecos, but we don't have an infinite supply of dirt yet. So step 1, let's go ahead and put down this fertilizer synthesizer. All right, we have our fertilizer synthesizer set up. Now it's time to take a look at everything else we need to prepare for. It's going to give us 120 grams of fertilizer, which is all good in the hood. It's also going to produce natural gas. I am less excited about that, especially considering the natural gas comes out at 76C. So I think what we're going to do to start with is seal in these rooms. Okay, this is what I have started. I ended up moving the fertilizer synthesizer over a little bit because I wanted the Wheezewort to provide sort of a cooling barrier. Now we need to figure out a way to deal with the natural gas. For that, we're going to use automation connected to a beautiful gas pump here. First thing we need is the gas pump. Let's take all of its stuff and send it out of the base. And that's done by following this gas pipe all the way up. We've done this in a few other places. We have one at the bottom of our base collecting all the carbon dioxide. And then we have one in here collecting a bunch of junk. The way it works, if it's not oxygen, it gets siphoned out. And we're going to do the same sort of setup here. First thing we need is a gas element sensor. We'll put it on this side, considering that's where the natural gas is going to be coming from. Then we add a NOT gate. One easy way to tell which way the NOT gate is going is the NOT gate itself has 2 small arrows, but one on the left and one on the right. And that is the direction of the automation signal. So we'll put that right here, and then we'll tie them in. Now all we have to do is add some additional power. And now our natural gas problem is a problem no more. We can probably take this a little bit further though. If you remember, we already have phosphorite coming here and getting dropped off. Rail lines work the same as pipes. When phosphorus comes up here, it'll split it off 50 and 50 if we just put a conveyor chute right here. Now, half the phosphorite will go down for the Wheezeworts, and the other half will be dropped off right next to our fertilizer synthesizer. Then we just put a simple auto sweeper in, And it'll take care of feeding the Wheezewort and loading the fertilizer synthesizer full of phosphorite. And we can even do one more better, and that's by adding a storage bin here, loading it up with dirt. So now everything here is automated. The polluted water is being provided by the toilets, the dirt's going to be provided by the storage bin, and the phosphorite is going to be shipped over from our Dreco ranch. In the background, I've also started on some Atmosuit docks. I went with this side of the base because I've also formalized our major power spine, and it's off to the right side of the base. Now, it's not perfect yet. We still have wires going everywhere, but this major spine will go from the very top to the very bottom. We checked, there's no vents, there's no gravitas buildings in our way, everything's looking good. And just like what power spines do, they provide a lot of negative decor. Hence the reason we're going to put our transportation network on the left side of the base. But that also means we need to brick in the rest of this. I originally did not have our grapefruit farm inside of our base. I have since moved that for a very specific reason. They need to stay oxygenated. Remember, plants require an air pressure of 150 grams. Well, there may have been a small accident here on the colony and oxygen stopped being produced for a little while. You know, dupe things. Better be safe than sorry. We'll be able to keep them within the temperature and the atmosphere full of oxygen. So now we're re-bricking in this side of the base. We know eventually this is going to be bricked in here, but right now there is no way to get from up here to down here. We're working on that, but first we have to move all this water from this side over to this side. We're currently getting all the piping set up. We also need to add the power, and while it looks like a significant power investment at 120 watts per, they only use that power when they have a suit to charge. And now we have to get to the business of actually making suits. And that'll require an exosuit forge. Beautiful. Now let's decide what we're actually going to make our Atmosuits out of. We put in 24 docks, which means we need 24 suits. I suppose we have the most of aluminum, and that's only because I've been using the copper a lot, so that way we can save the aluminum for more practical purposes that require that good aluminum thermal conductivity. But we're running low on copper, and until they get to sending it over to us on Takarini, aluminum it is. 24 suits queued up. We have 283 units of reed fiber, so we are fine. While the dupes are figuring out how to make Atmos suits, I think it's time for us to get to the business of making these greenhouses. Like we were saying before, a greenhouse can only be 96 tiles, so we know exactly where the door is going at a minimum. But with 96 tiles, we need to check our math to make sure that we can put enough grub fruit plants into, say, maybe 4 greenhouses? Remember, we're running 84 plants. When you subtract 2 for a farm station, and then 2 more for storage bins, that'll leave us with 20 tiles of actual plant space. Looks like we're going to be running 80 plants for a little while. Which is okay though, because with a grub and a farmer's touch, these plants should be growing lickety-split. You may also be thinking, well, just don't make the greenhouses 4 tiles high. Make them only 3 tiles high. Well, the disadvantage of having 3 tile high room, then you have nowhere to put the auto sweepers. And I would rather most of the grunt work of fertilizing these plants to be done by auto sweeper. So here's an example of our completed farm. Now we're still trying to put some oxygen in here, so it's not running perfect. But I wanted to highlight something that is just incredible. This plant has been given the farmer's touch, which gives it a growth speed of plus 100%. It then has also been given the rub, which gives it an additional 50%. The normal life cycle for this plant was 8 cycles. With the 100% bonus and then a 50% bonus, the whole plant now only takes 3 cycles. With our first farm settled, it's about time that we spread the love and create 3 more. Alright, well, other than just a little bit of sweep up, we've completed our farm upgrade, but we're starting to run into another issue. Of course we are. We're at 26 dupes, and quite frankly, our oxygen delivery system just cannot keep up. Part of the problem is the fact that we're trying to load up so many Atmos suits. We're getting hydrogen all over the place and everything like that. We need to add more oxygen to the system. Right here's a perfect example. It got way too much hydrogen in it, and now it's paying the price. So, it's time to add in another electrolyzer setup. All right, so apparently the hydrogen backing up is completely my fault. When we redid the farm, we got rid of a lot of the piping and, well, the hydrogen's backed up, hence the reason so much of it's heading up in our oxygen supply. Hashtag my fault, hashtag still the dupe's fault. All right, our second oxygen center is up, and I apologize in advance. This is going to be messy. What we've done is take a split right off the primary liquid pump. You can see that it comes up here and then over. What it does here is very important. As an example, I built this and it's the same thing that's happening there, just a little bit of expanded. Let's imagine this is the primary liquid line that's heading to the first oxygen center. Anytime you see a split in pipes like this, just like we were saying earlier, 50% of it goes this way and then 50% of it goes that way. Because the flow goes from in to out, and then in to out, the liquid will travel around here and then come back and rejoin. Now, why are we doing that? Remember, we're using this cold liquid to chill the oxygen down. So we need to chill it here too. But we don't want to take all the chill. We want to split the chill between the two oxygen centers. And that's exactly what this does. 50% of the water packets come across here, chill all this, and then rejoin the other 50% packets that have not touched any of this heat. They then still head down and cool this oxygen center before being desalinated and water sieved. So we have followed it up to this point. This is where we're going to make a couple of changes. And it's pretty simple. When it comes out of the water sieve, it's going to go in two different directions. And there it is. Now, of course, we have to remove this here. We need to remove this connection here. In fact, we can remove this pipe too. It's just making it complicated. All right, that's better. Now it's much easier to see that once the water is desalinated and water sieved, it goes in two directions. Again, in a 50-50 split. Half of it's going to go here to feed this oxygen center, and half of it's going to come down here and feed this oxygen center. The only caveat is this oxygen center, once it's used the water that it needs, the excess is then fed into our research water tank. Remember, until you finish all of your research, you're going to need a pitcher pump connected to a water source so that you can keep your supercomputer going. Now, right now, we're having a bit of a power issue, and I'll explain why. Because of all the changes in the background, the dupes aren't concentrated on wheels. They're spread up between all the wheels. The way this system works, it's better to start with, say, 90% power. That way you know you have 10 duplicates there at all times. And then when it gets down to 80, you can add a few duplicates. Well, when you're already running near empty, all the dupes are going to be trying to run at all times. And then when you have batteries that empty, kicks the dupes off the wheels, there's a lot of different problems with it. Because of our new power requirements with our second oxygen center, we've added a couple more batteries. We still have a few more to go. But once we get all of these in, we'll kill the entire grid, get all the dupes to run on the wheels, charge everything back up, which really kind of resets the system. Now, as for the oxygen flow, it's even more complicated. Long story simple, these pair of pumps are feeding the farm area and the top level of our base. The second pair of pumps is feeding the left side of our base. The third pair is feeding the atmosuits first, and then the middle of the base. And finally, the entire second oxygen center is just feeding this right spine. Because so many dupes spend most of their days running on wheels, it's important that they have a constant and consistent oxygen supply. Now, there is a stopgap in the whole system, and that's the desalinator and the water sieve. Each device can only sieve 5 kilos per second, and we know each electrolyzer can take up to 1 kilo per second. So that's a total of 8 kilos per second being used and only 5 kilos per second being provided. It's still not that big of a deal. Each electrolyzer produces 888 grams of oxygen per second. That means both setups combined are producing 7,104 grams per second of oxygen, which is enough to keep 71 normal breathing dupes going. Well, we're not gonna have 71 normal dupes. We're only going to 50 to 60, which means we're not going to need the full 8 kilos of water per second. Once this whole colony reaches max gas pressure, we'll start to see that water back up again. The alternative solution is just to add another water sieve and another desalinator. and have it independently just running this oxygen center. I'm not prepared to do that quite yet. Because power is so finicky on our dupe only power run, I'm trying to squeeze every last joule out. So is the total number 50 dupes? Is it 60 dupes? I'm willing to bet it's more on the lower side, because we want to reach an equilibrium where we have enough dupes running on wheels and enough oxygen to supply them. In fact, since we know our maximum water output is 5 kilos per second, that means we can feed 5 electrolyzers total. And 5 electrolyzers running will give us a total of 4,440 kilos per second. So there you have it. I think our maximum on this colony will be 44 dupes. I just noticed this bridge was backwards. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out a way to blame a dupe for this one yet. So apparently we had another problem with this system. The fertilizer synthesizer is not using as much polluted water as we are creating every cycle. That fix is not too bad. We just tied it back into these tanks here. Now, when this tank is full, it'll just overflow and head off into these liquid reservoirs. And again, one day this is not going to be a problem because we'll be able to take this extra water and feed thimbleweeds. And then all is good in the world. The other mistake that I made was incorrectly predicting the weight of natural gas. Natural gas is heavier than oxygen, so it's sinking. So our beautiful gas pump system is never even seeing it. So, since this liquid reservoir is basically doing nothing now, we're going to do a little redesign and put the gas pump on the bottom and fix this up right. Okay, this system is now fixed. For the third time? Well, the plumbing's fairly simple. Dirty water comes in and tries to clean it. If the water sieve is backed up because it has all the clean water it needs, it'll send the extra polluted water down this pipe through here. Because of the bridge, the fertilizer synthesizer will get the polluted water first. If it's full, it will then overflow from this bridge and then head up to our last overflow. Eventually, we'll have thimbleweeds here that'll drink all of this regardless. And it took a few cycles, but we finally got ourselves all sealed in. We moved all the water that was here, pushed it over here, and then sealed in the rest of the base. I believe you can call this a big chungus base now. I mean, we have plenty of space. The last thing to do is to throw down one of our fancy smancy atmosuit checkpoints. We'll put it right here. And there it is. Now every dupe that leaves should have a suit on. I made some minor changes on the gas structure. This pair and this pair are now responsible for keeping the atmosuits going. And then I segmented these two far right pairs, just so the oxygen was more evenly distributed. Now each one of these pairs has a few vents, and that's all they're responsible for, which is good because we're starting to see backup. We're starting to see gas vents over pressure. And just like we predicted, power situation is now resolved. Because at the beginning though, those electrolyzers were running pretty much flat out. But now that they don't have to run flat out, it allows us to store some power. And as you can see, the entire time I've been talking, the power available has only gone down by 0.1 kilojoule. It's because we have so many batteries. It takes a lot of joules to be used to really impact our power grid. And that's important because we want to consolidate who's running and when. These 3 levels are now full on dupes running, and because of it, our power supply is slowly going back up. Next episode, we'll finally get to the point of building our spaceport. And just because we've never tried it before, we might try to use one of those sugar engines. At least to knock out our orbital research. But you know we're going to build a nice spaceport. So I know this episode was a little bit of a hodgepodge, but we had so much work that we had to catch up on inside the colony. Priority number 1 among those was expanding our oxygen supply. But now that oxygen's getting fixed up, everything's resuming back to normal. In addition to the oxygen supply, we managed to redo our farms and put in some proper greenhouses. Soon we're going to have so many calories we're not going to know what to do with them. Well, yeah we do. We're just going to put them right in our deep freezer. And the great thing, since we're only running 80 plants now, instead of 84, we can feed a couple more Sweetles. So we increased this up to 5 Sweetles. Well, that's about it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Talk to you soon.